Hello and welcome back to the Abundant Living University. I'm your host, Glenn Ullman. Well, I've been thinking about this video now for about a week and a half as I've watched the rancor in Washington, as you all have as well. Clearly, I have had phone conversations with many of you worried about whether the country would go into default, and I assured you that it would not. Because the reality in the issue that we have at hand has nothing to do with whether we can afford to pay our bills. We can. The issues really are out in the distance. And one of the things that concerns me is that neither party is talking about the true issue. And the true issue is that we have the largest generation in world history, the baby boom generation, that is now rapidly and consistently turning 65 and placing increasingly large demands on both Social Security and our healthcare system. And I've seen this personally in the last weekend with 3 or 4 of my relatives, all in their 80s, all using the healthcare system, between hospitalizations that are lasting into the weeks, to long-term care, to diagnostic tests. And of course, under Medicare, the premium that you pay is essentially the expense, regardless of how often it is used. So, as we go forward, the thing that I think is most striking is that both political parties, and I've mentioned this before, are talking about cutting the size of government. But watch carefully, because there's no way to get to balanced, whether you have a balanced budget amendment, or you raise taxes, or you cut discretionary spending. There is no way to get to balanced unless you have 2 things happen. One is we change our entitlement system, an entitlement system now that guarantees for senior citizens the right to health care and pays for most of that cost. So we need a change in how we pay for health care and what things will be paid for by the government and what will be private pay. And the other thing that we need to realize is that without a growing economy, there is no way we can balance our expenses and our revenues. And in fact, if you look at the last couple of years, the sharp drop-off in the economy, actually it's going to end up being the worst recession since the Great Depression. Gross domestic product dropped by over 8%, much worse than previously thought. But what has happened is our revenues have gone down. The amount of income the government takes in has dropped dramatically. Our spending has gone up, but nowhere near as much as our deficit, in fact, has gone up because, again, even if our spending went up a little bit, our revenues were down so far that this gap, this deficit exists. So I think we can now rest assured that over the next 3 or 4 months, there'll be lots of rancor back and forth as a deal comes together on how to get additional budget cuts over the next 10 years. But watch carefully, because it has to come from changes in Social Security and changes in Medicare and Medicaid, because if that doesn't happen, we will never get to balanced. As always, I welcome your comments. Stay calm, go for a walk, turn off the TV, as I said to many of you over the last week. What we see in Washington and what draws us to the TV to watch it is kind of like being on the interstate and seeing and knowing that there's a horrible accident up ahead, and you see the ambulances and the fire trucks and the police cars, and you think, oh, I don't want to look, I don't want to look. And then for some reason, we're drawn to the carnage. Get outside, stop watching it. Long-term fixes take a long time to get into play, but they look like they're moving in that direction.